Welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I've done a cart clearing, probably because there was a month where I read a single book. So I thought it was time to take another look at my cart and get it cleared off so I can make room for more books as I continue throughout the rest of this year to get my TBR taken care of. So we're going to start, as always, with the books that I either have a review for or they're part of a dedicated series. And so even if I don't have a review up now, they'll be part of a later video. And we're going to start with Epic Series Summer. I need to see where I last left off and which of these books I still need to cover. So there may already be a video out on some of these and some others I have not talked about yet in that Epic Series Summer format, but they'll be up soon. We have Mistborn, Secret History, and Dawn Shard. These are both novellas within their respective series. So Dawn Shard takes place between books 2 and 3 of Stormlight Archives, I believe. Or is it between 3 and 4? Was this after Oathbringer? I think this was after Oathbringer. So yeah, I think it's Oathbringer, then this, and then you go to Rhythm of War. So between books 3 and 4. And then Mistborn Secret History is recommended to read after Mistborn Era 2, book number 3, which is Bands of Mourning, which I also have read. So these are the novellas. I'm not sure which of these I've talked about yet, although both factor into my Cosmere and Gnosticism video essay. I hadn't had a chance to take a look at that yet. It's very fun. I did a lot of research, and it's a very cool thing, even if you're not reading these books, to see the connections with a 5th century Christian belief system. I also read through both Shadow of Self and Bands of Mourning. I'm pretty sure I talked about both of these in my last Epic Series Summer, so I think these have been covered quite extensively. I like them a lot. Shadows of Self works more with, I think, Wax and Wayne's relationship, and this deals much more with Wax's relationship with his wife, which I find more and more endearing as time goes on. I have the Spellshop. I know I've filmed a review for the Spellshop. I don't think I've edited and put it up yet, so that's one to look forward to. But generally, I liked it. I think it was 4 out of 5 stars. It just suffered a little bit from not enough conflict and some of the stakes, some of the things being too easy to get through. Like they would stress about the things that would go wrong and then nothing would go wrong. Also, the relationship is less of a will they, won't they, and a more of a when are they going to do it? Let's get it over with, please. So overall, fun and cute. A very nice cozy fantasy, if that is your thing, which is my thing. But not the strongest of that genre, in my opinion. Black Prism is also part of Epic Series Summer. I got through the first book. This is the first book in the Lightbringer series, and I got through it mostly on audiobook. I think this one also ended up as 4 out of 5 stars. There is some issue with characterization in here, but the world building is very interesting. The magic system is very interesting, and it leads off on a cliffhanger that makes me very excited to pick up the next book. Book that took me a month to read, Oathbringer. Okay, so this one was, I think, another one where I have talked about it already. Generally, I liked it. I thought the characterization is very cool. It expands on the Cosmere a lot, but ultimately, it's a little bit of the dour part of the storytelling. So there are a lot of losses in here, and it can be frustrating listening to that and reading about that for so many pages. I also still feel like pacing is very, very slow in these books because of the amount of characters they follow and because of how much Brandon Sanderson wants to tease out these backstories and their significance to the plot. I feel like these books can be shorter, but they're not. And so it is what it is. It ended up as a 4-star read for me. Still really like Shallan, though. Still my favorite character, and some really cool things happened with her in this book, so that's also a plus for me. Dungeon Crawler Carl, which I have a review for up on the channel. A lit RPG, another one of these genres that I'm really getting into in recent years. Another one from Matt Dinneman. I read Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon. I don't think I did a review on Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon, but I liked it quite a bit. This one I liked a little bit less in some aspects, a little bit more in others, and it ended up in the same range as a 4 out of 5 stars. Go check out the review if you want a more detailed breakdown of what I liked and didn't like about that series. I have Horror Movie, which I have a review for up on the channel. This is one where the more I think about it, the worse my rating gets on it. I think it's now down to a 3 out of 5 because of its convoluted nature and its theming. Especially the ending is problematic. And check out my video for my full thoughts on this one. I do think it has an audience. It's just that audience is not me. And finally, I know I have a review up for Ghostlore that's doing quite well. I believe this one was either 4 or 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed Ghostlore. I think it's a really good setup for a story. My only misgiving with it really is the pacing. And the fact that for its price, you're getting a little less comic book than you would in another trade. But a very intriguing premise, very cool monster designs. Something to check out if you're a fan of things like Something is Killing the Children. Very cool monster designs, worth a read. I definitely recommend picking it up. That gets me to the books that I've not talked about at all on the channel as far as I can recall. And so we'll do a little bit more discussing with these, but we'll try to keep it short. So we've got Knights, which is kind of a Buffy-esque found family, I don't know, Fully Cooley almost vibes to this one, in a world full of monsters and vampires. And it's one that I'm gonna need to do another read through of, because a lot of what you're told at the beginning is not true, and part of the fun of the book is learning the truth of a lot of the mysteries that are going on. This does a good job of having the kind of storytelling where you, the reader, are not given the answers right away because the characters don't know the answers or are refusing to share that information, and you're just kind of going along and having to pick up the pieces and figure things out as the story goes on. And it doesn't ever get so frustrating that I wanted to put it down, but it is something that I think will benefit from a reread, knowing how the story ends and looking forward to those moments where the reveals will inform information that happens at the beginning of the book. So I'm going to give this one a reread. Probably will give a review for it because I really did enjoy it. I just think I need to sit down with it again and think critically about it before I put out a review. We have the Supermassive Annual for this year. It's not anything that's going to blow people away that aren't already reading this story. This one deals with an evil alternate universe character and the other members of the Supermassive universe having to pull together to extract someone from that universe and get them back to ours. So kind of a heist-ish kind of thing, but it's very short. There's not a lot going on, and it's only comprehensible if you followed all the other Supermassive titles. I read through Flic. Flic is the graphic novel version of a French nonfiction text where this investigator went and infiltrated the police. He basically became a police officer for a number of years and then left and wrote up his findings on all of the issues that the police are encountering right now. I feel like this is going to be something that is going to be challenging for a number of readers because it is talking about sensitive issues, but I found it really interesting. Look at another country's issues with things that are definitely happening stateside and likely have similar root causes, more than just talk about the problems that the police force is having. It does have recommendations for like the things that they could do to try to address some of the problems, and it is sympathetic toward the workers because this person ended up joining the police and saw firsthand like the pressure that was put on them and the reasons why these incidents happen is from factors beyond their control, but is still condemning the ultimate result, the overrepresentation of teens and young adults in the prison system and the issues of violence and police brutality. So I feel like it's a decent look. I think I would want to read the novel because I do think something is lost in the comic book form. There's no reason for them to be cats to start with, but also I think that it would just be more thorough in a full text of what occurred than what you'd get out of the graphic novel. Flic was on my 24 for 2024, so eventually I'll do another look at it at the end of the year when I'm talking about all those titles together. I read through Duke, which is one of 2 possibly ongoing G.I. Joe titles set in the same universe as Void Rivals and Transformers. I thought that would kind of be like a one-off, like, side thing, in much the same way that Void Rivals has not, up to the point that I've read it, had strong ties with Transformers, but this ties the story into Transformers pretty directly. In fact, a scene from Transformers Volume 1 is integral to the backstory and the motivation of the main character here in him investigating further what's going on in the world. This is another one where I feel like if you're already invested in this universe, if you've already read Transformers or Void Rivals, it'd be a good pickup. And it's telling a different story with human characters and more of an espionage plot thing, which I like for G.I. Joe. But I don't know if it would stand up as well if this was the only title you were reading, because it is already tying itself to that Transformers title. So without having read that, you might be losing out on some details, and some future crossover events are definitely going to occur, so you most likely want to be reading both titles. At Beastars Volume 4, I picked this up for my tournament because I wasn't sure who was going to win out on the Volume 3 tournament bracket, so I just ended up picking up, I think, almost all of the Volume 3s and Volume 4s. This is a manga series that continues to improve in the art department, and the story is still compelling, but it's not one that grabs me so much that I feel the need to go out and buy the next volume. I think it ended up at a 3 or 4 stars out of 5, so still a solid title. Definitely, if you've been thinking about picking up Beastars, it's one that I think is very effective in its storytelling. It just doesn't grab me the way that some of these other manga that I've been reading recently have. Costume change, because it's been like 2 days since I recorded that other section and my camera died. So let's get into the rest of my cart. Haru, book number 1, Spring. So this is another one that I picked up from the library. It might be one that I ultimately pick up for myself because I really enjoyed this book. Haru is about a little bird named Haru and his pig friend Yama. Both of them exist in a world where literal manifestation of darkness once almost took over the entire planet, and then there was all this lore, like Lord of the Rings style lore drop at the beginning of this book about how the darkness spread across the land, but then it got snagged by a pure white thorn, and it started to unravel, so it doubled back on itself, and it created all these mystical artifacts that are throughout the world, and it's just like absolutely insane. Then it's like, tiny little bird friend, he's gonna go on an adventure, like within this very dark, very like high fantasy world, which I really loved, and I thought it was a lot of fun. This is meant to be middle grade fiction, I'm pretty sure, and some of the things here are rather terrifying. There's a scene in which the two of them, Haru and Yama, are getting dragged into a bog by the bog bodies, which are just skeletons, and it's rather scary, I think, for a child, but I loved every minute of it. I think I gave this 4 out of 5. I want to see where the story's heading. Apparently, from what I can tell, it's going to be 4 volumes because it's going to go through every season. It's going to start in spring and end in spring. So we've got some more coming up for this. This is a new release. I'm very much looking forward to what comes next for Haru. Next up, I have Wynd, which I have in hardcover, but I have the first volume in paperback, so I'm going to have to rebuy volume 1 because I really like this series. This is James Tynion's young adult series, and for a guy who writes these really horrific, dark things, it's unsurprising to see that this has a dark edge to it too. It takes place in a fantasy world where outside the walls of the City of Men, magic runs rampant, and if you are out there too long, your body starts mutating and changing. A lot of queer representation in here, a lot of metaphors for bigotry and acceptance and things like that. Also a really captivating story that combines a lot of familiar fantasy tropes in a very engaging and fun way. One that I would highly recommend. It's probably one of the best YA fantasy comics I've read in a good while, so would definitely recommend. I believe these were also 4 or 5 stars each. The strength of any given volume completely dependent on the particular plot that is running within that issue. Alice in Borderland #1. So I picked this up after doing my video on the gambling manga that I love so much, because I mentioned that video that like this is probably something I should pick up. It's very much in the vein of these gambling manga where they set up some sort of scenario and you're trying to figure out as the reader, how are these characters going to get through it? For those unfamiliar with Alice in Borderland, it's kind of like an isekai meets these gambling manga stories where this group is transported to another world that's very much like our world, but there are these games that happen, and if you don't play the games in enough time, then you end up dying, and so you have to take on these challenges. They get progressively more dangerous and progressively more convoluted in the ways that you have to manipulate rules and think outside the box in order to get out of the scenario. I had watched the beginning of the TV show earlier this year, I believe, and we ended up stopping partway through because there was a very grim episode and then it kind of just like fell off. But what I found very interesting was the initial scenario in the TV show was completely different from this initial scenario in the book. And I can kind of see why, but I'm curious to go back now and watch the TV show and do kind of a comparison of the two. What did they keep? What did they change? So that is something I'll probably be returning to, but a definite recommend for me. I believe it's got 5 stars. It was excellent and I loved everything about it. Solo Leveling Volumes 1 and 2. This is a Korean webcomic, I believe, which is in full color, which is very cool. A little bit more pricey because of that. It's another lit RPG adjacent story where this character is already in a world where these dungeons exist and dungeon crawling is a thing. So it's a little bit different than our world, but then he starts getting these special alerts that only he can see, and there's this gamification of his life, but also it pushes him to do things that maybe he would otherwise not do, or it punishes him severely. So he's got to run a certain distance and do a certain number of push-ups and sit-ups, or else he gets punished. There is a point where the program that is basically dictating his life says, okay, now you have to kill these guys or else there's going to be a serious consequence, which is you die. And so despite what he personally wants to do, he's forced into these scenarios. The hook here is he starts off as one of the lowest rank hunters or dungeon delvers, whatever they're called in this series. And he very quickly ascends that ladder because of this extra thing that is dictating these scenarios to him. There's a lot of mystery around why this is happening to him and is it happening to other people, and it's not really explored in the way that it maybe would be in something aimed at a younger audience, which I do rather appreciate. I like that it keeps a little bit of the mystery behind what exactly is going on in the series from you. Lit RPG is something that I am really big into right now, so this is another one that I really enjoyed and is a strong title that I'm going to continue to collect. Kaiju #8, Volume 11. This is a continuation of the story. This one in particular has a number of like one-on-one fights that are pushing the characters to new levels. I'm still very much enjoying where they've taken the story. I appreciate that the entire comic was not solely trying to keep Kafka's identity as Kaiju number 8 secret from this entire government organization that kind of ran its course within the first, I think, 3 or 4 volumes of the manga. And I've appreciated even more as it's gone forward, expanding to focus on the supporting cast. Here we have, again, a number of one-on-one fights that are meant to be specific challenges for the people involved in them. So Kafka gets a really cool fight. I like Kikuru's fight in particular. There's a number of really interesting visual elements to it that I'm very much looking forward to seeing how they interpret into the anime that is now running. And overall, it's just another enjoyable read. It's not anything deep, but if what you're looking for is like fun shonen kaiju action, this is a solid choice for sure. I read through 3 more volumes of Chainsaw Man, which I am still enjoying, but it is definitely showing a little bit of its weaknesses as the story goes on, particularly with the pacing of some of the story, which I praised early on was very effective in getting past the setup of the story, but I feel like we run through some of these scenarios a little bit too quickly and just try to get, it feels like we're just trying to rush and get to the end. I feel like there are scenes in here or sequences in here that are almost incomprehensible the way that they are drawn and paneled. There is a arc in here that's like 2 issues long that just adds too many characters too quickly, runs through too many scenarios, and introduces too many convoluted ideas at once that it becomes difficult to follow, and that's not an enjoyable read. That being said, I still feel like the characters are very entertaining. The action sequences are still a lot of fun. It still ends up being in that 3 to 4 star range, mostly 4 star. But there are definitely some things that I'm beginning to notice as the story goes on where I appreciate the more tightly focused story rather than this ballooning out that we did in the more recent issues. Finally, another one of my 24 for 2024 was The Man in the McIntosh Suit. This is a noir style, not really detective fiction, but kind of a mystery where this man's searching for his wife. I really feel like the art does a disservice to the storytelling here. It's just a little bit too cartoony and a little too plain. A lot of the characters look very similar, so early on it is difficult to tell who's who, and even in later chapters I was mostly relying on what the characters were wearing to be able to differentiate them. This follows Bobo, a migrant farmer from the Philippines who is trying to make ends meet to support his family back home, and then discovers that it's possible that his wife is in the States, and so goes on a search to find her. There's a lot of mistaken identity and people claiming to be other people in here. Overall, I think this ended up at a 3 out of 5. It was fine, but it wasn't the exciting noir detective fiction I was hoping for. I read Trust by Pete Buttigieg as part of a reading I was doing with my AP Lang class. We're listening to the audiobook in class on Fridays, and after that Friday I would take it home over the weekend and read that chapter. It has a lot of interesting ideas about the importance of trust and of social trust in particular, and gets around to proposing solutions eventually, but I do feel like it is obviously very heavy-handed toward his own biases, in that it never points out the faults of democratic leaders or of those in power that share Buttigieg's political affiliations. Every time he talks about himself in a leadership capacity, it's all about how he's trying to do the right thing and do the best thing. And every time he's talking about people from the other side of the aisle, it's all about how they've done terribly and how they've eroded public trust. I don't disagree with the conclusion that he's drawing, that over time we have had this erosion of public trust. I do find it disingenuous that he tries to paint that as an issue that's only being perpetrated by the right. So I feel like had he included some examples of Democratic presidents who had done something to, add to this degradation of trust, that would have made it a stronger argument. But overall, I don't deny what he's saying here. I don't think anything is really revelatory necessarily, but it was nevertheless a good read. I gave it, I think, 4 out of 5. I just felt like it would have been stronger had he, been more even-handed with his criticisms of those in power in politics. Talking about politics, this is not a good idea. So, the last thing I know I read was a Ben Hatke book called Something in the Basement, or A Creature in the Basement, something like that. I'll put it up here. It was very cute. I think I gave it 4 out of 5. It reminded me a little bit of Subcutanean. Honestly, of all the comparisons I could make, in that this child is tasked with going and fetching a sock down in the basement where the dryer is, and he goes down to the basement and he finds a secret room off the basement and a secret room off of that and a secret room off of that, and it turns out there's this whole catacomb layer, an entire fantasy realm underneath his house. Very clever designs, very clever world building. I love Ben Hatke's stuff. This is obviously aimed toward children, but I just find the whimsy so compelling, and it blended these dark elements and this message of hope and perseverance. I appreciated that the main character was not just a one-note completely brave character, nor was he a completely cowardly character. He fell somewhere in between. I think that's an important thing for kids to see, that we try our best, but sometimes we stumble and sometimes we make mistakes and upset people. So a really good read, and only took me maybe half an hour to get through. So if you want a quick read that's really cute and has kind of a dark feel to it, it's a good choice. And that's all the books I've read in the past couple of months. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I hope your reading journey is going well, as always. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can grow this corner of our BookTube community. And until the next one, take care. I read Pete Buttigieg's Trust. I read Pete Buttigieg's I read Pete Buttigieg's